The store was buzzing with its usual Saturday crowd, but all eyes suddenly turned to one aisle. A young black man, no more than 35, was surrounded by two uniformed officers, their voices sharp and commanding. Shelves rattled as one cop shoved him against the display, accusing him of theft without a shred of evidence. Customers whispered, some pulling out phones to record. To the crowd, it looked like another humiliating arrest unfolding in real time. But what no one knew, not the officers, not the onlookers, was that this man carried a secret that would soon flip the entire narrative upside down. His name was Jordan Harris. At first glance, he blended into the weekend crowd. Dark jeans, a plain hoodie, and sneakers that had seen better days. He wasn't flashy, didn't demand attention, and on that afternoon, he had only come into the store for something simple, a pack of protein bars and bottled water after his morning run. But the way the officers zeroed in on him, you would think he had walked in carrying a neon sign above his head. Jordan had grown accustomed to the stares, the suspicious glances, the store clerks who followed him down aisles as though his very presence spelled trouble. Yet each time he forced himself to stay calm, to let it roll off his back. But this time felt different. This time the hostility wasn't subtle. It was loud, public, and humiliating. The officers, responding to a supposed shoplifting call, had barely entered the store before targeting him. No questions asked, no chance to explain. Just accusations hurled in front of strangers. A mother covered her child's eyes. A cashier froze mid-scan, lips parted in shock. Jordan's heart pounded, not from guilt, but from anger. Still, he stayed silent, his eyes steady, his breathing controlled. Inside, though, he wrestled with a storm. He knew something the officers didn't. Under that plain hoodie and quiet demeanor, he carried an identity that could turn the situation on its head. But revealing it too soon would rob him of a truth he wanted these officers to face, the truth of how they treated someone they assumed had no power. The tension built in the room, and the bystanders leaned closer, waiting to see if this would be yet another story of humiliation. Or the moment everything changed. The officers tightened their grip, one yanking Jordan's arms behind his back while the other patted down his pockets. His items, protein bars and water, fell to the floor, rolling across the tiles as though mocking the absurdity of the situation. "Caught red-handed," one officer muttered loudly enough for the entire store to hear. The other smirked, tugging Jordan toward the checkout counter as if parading him for the crowd. The whispers swelled. Some customers shook their heads in quiet disapproval, while others muttered under their breath, their biases confirmed by the sight before them. A teenage boy in the corner raised his phone higher, recording every second with wide-eyed fascination. This was entertainment to some, tragedy to others. To Jordan, it was both familiar and infuriating. He could feel the weight of dozens of stares pressing down on him, but he refused to drop his gaze. Every time these moments happened, on sidewalks, in traffic stops, in retail stores, he remembered the lessons drilled into him since boyhood. Keep calm, don't resist, live to fight another day. But beneath his stillness now, there was something brewing, a steady fire waiting for the right spark. The officers were careless in their certainty. They hadn't checked store cameras. They hadn't even looked into his bag. They assumed, and in their arrogance they acted as judge, jury, and executioner in front of an entire audience. To them, he was just another faceless man who would be hauled off, paperwork filed, case forgotten. But Jordan was no ordinary man. By day, yes, he blended in like anyone else, but his reality was far from ordinary. He was an off-duty police captain, someone who had led squads into dangerous operations, who had earned the respect of colleagues across the force, who carried authority that reached far beyond the two men now shoving him around like a criminal. Yet he kept that truth close, choosing patience over fury, because what mattered most wasn't proving his innocence. He had nothing to hide. What mattered was revealing the injustice at its rawest, showing these officers for exactly what they were when they thought no one was watching. As the crowd's murmurs grew louder, the store manager rushed over, wringing his hands nervously. "Officers, are you sure?" He began, but one sharp glare silenced him. The power dynamic was clear. Uniforms commanded obedience, no questions asked. The manager stepped back, torn between protecting his business and witnessing an unfolding injustice he felt powerless to stop. Jordan's pulse steadied. Every second the officers mistreated him was another second the cameras and witnesses documented the truth. Every shove, every sneer, every baseless accusation layered more weight onto the scales of justice that would eventually tip in his favor. Still, the humiliation burned. Kneeling on the cold tile as cuffs clicked around his wrists, Jordan stared at the ground, jaw tight. He could hear the officers laughing under their breath, congratulating themselves for nipping trouble in the bud. They had no idea the storm they had just invited into their lives. And then, as they hauled him toward the exit, the moment of reckoning began to unfold. The officers pushed Jordan through the automatic doors, the afternoon sun spilling across the parking lot. Phones followed, recording every step as if the world already knew this scene would not end quietly. Jordan felt the cuffs dig into his wrists, but he kept his head high. The humiliation was undeniable, yet beneath it, a calm resolve carried him forward. One officer pulled open the squad car door while the other shoved Jordan against the hood. "Another thief off the streets," he sneered, patting himself on the back with arrogance thick enough to taste. Laughter followed, sharp and ugly. The crowd outside the store shifted, uneasy, yet no one intervened. They had seen this story too many times before, but Jordan knew this wasn't going to end like the others. With deliberate calm, he turned his head toward the officer holding his arm. "Check my back pocket," he said quietly, but with authority that made the words land heavier than expected. The officer scoffed, ready to dismiss him, but something in Jordan's tone made him pause. Reluctantly, the officer reached into Jordan's pocket and froze. His fingers brushed against something cold, solid, unmistakable. Pulling it out, his smug expression collapsed. In his hand gleamed a badge. Not a novelty, not a fake, an official emblem of rank and power. The crowd gasped, phones trembling as they zoomed in to capture the moment. The second officer's face drained of color, his arrogance dissolving into panic. The badge caught the sunlight, commanding attention like a beacon. The engraving was clear. Police Captain. Jordan locked eyes with them, his voice steady, cutting through the murmurs like a blade. "Now tell me again, what exactly did I steal?" Silence fell. The crowd, once spectators to a humiliation, now shifted in energy. Gasps turned to whispers of awe, the narrative flipping in an instant. The same officers who had dragged him in disgrace now stood exposed, their authority shattered by the very proof of Jordan's real power. The balance of power had shifted completely, and the officers knew it. Their mistake wasn't just arrogance. It was underestimating a man whose badge carried more weight than theirs ever could. The parking lot was still, the kind of silence that only follows a storm. The badge in the officer's trembling hand gleamed like undeniable truth, and no one could look away. For the first time since this humiliating spectacle began, the control shifted. Jordan, once treated like a criminal, now stood as the embodiment of authority. "Strength and justice," the officers stammered, scrambling for excuses, miscommunication, following protocol, just doing our job. But their words rang hollow. The crowd had seen everything. They had heard the mocking laughter, witnessed the rough treatment, and now they watched two men shrink beneath the weight of their own prejudice. Jordan didn't need to raise his voice. His composure was louder than any outburst could have been. He retrieved the badge from the officer's hand, holding it firmly, the symbol of his rank and sacrifice. Years of service, leadership, and courage rested in that badge, things the officers could never fake. Turning to the crowd, Jordan let the moment hang heavy. "This," he said quietly, lifting the badge, "isn't just mine. It represents the truth you've all seen today, that judgment without facts, fueled by prejudice, will always backfire." His words pierced through the air, lingering even as the murmurs swelled again. The officers shifted, shame written across their faces. For them, this day would not vanish into routine paperwork. It would follow them, a permanent stain on their records, A reminder that the uniforms they wore demanded accountability they had failed to show. As Jordan removed the cuffs himself, the crowd erupted, not in cheers but in something heavier: respect, reflection, a reckoning with what they had just witnessed. Phones lowered, not out of disinterest but out of awe. Walking away, Jordan didn't celebrate. He didn't need to. The point had been made. His restraint, his dignity, and his quiet revelation had spoken louder than any confrontation ever could. And as the people dispersed, one question lingered in their minds, echoing into silence. How many others have been silenced, dismissed, or destroyed without ever having the chance to show the truth they carried all along?